Welcome back again to Arinka's Kitchen. I have another family favorite recipe from my grandmother and mother. It's called cherry pie, Cseresznyés Lepény. And so what you would need for the dough recipe is 5 cups of flour, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 1 rind of 1 lemon, 2 cups of butter, 2 to 3 tablespoons of vegetable shortening, and then what you do is you put together the ingredients with the wet ingredients, and the wet ingredients consist of 1 cup of sugar, 3 tablespoons of vanilla, 3 whole eggs, and 2 to 6 or more tablespoons of milk. Today, when I put the dough together, I didn't need to use any milk for it because it was moistened up. But if you find that your dough is a bit dry, then you can add some milk to it. So, and the topping, of course, is 1 1/4 kilograms of fresh cherries, 3/4 cups of white sugar, 1 cup of ground breadcrumbs, and when the cherry pie comes out of the oven, and when you start slicing it up, you can sprinkle some powdered icing sugar. So I've got about a tablespoon of powdered icing sugar. Okay, so first of all, what I did was I mixed together the flour, baking powder, salt, and grated rind of 1 lemon. And with a hand or electric mixer, you can combine the butter, shortening, sugar, vanilla, and the 3 whole eggs and the grated rind of the other lemon. Okay, and then what I do is I gradually mix together the flour mixture to the butter mixture and gently mix it together. And then as soon as I see that it's the right consistency, then I start using my hands to knead the dough together gently. And the dough should have a semi-sticky consistency. So then what you do is you separate the dough into 2 mounds, and then you cut out a piece of parchment paper the size of a medium-sized heat-resistant baking dish, and then you roll out the dough in mounds into a 1/2 inch thick rectangular shape onto the separate pieces of parchment paper. And that's what I'm going to show you what I did with the dough. So this is what the dough consistency looks like. And what I did was I rolled out half of the mound onto some parchment paper, and then I turned the parchment paper over, and then I peeled it off, and then I put it onto the bottom of the this heat-resistant baking dish. Then what I did was I mixed together, and I'm just going to show you the mixture of cherries. So what I did with the cherries, I pitted the cherries. And one little trick that you can use to pit the cherries is that you can get a really stiff straw, like a wide mouth straw kind of, and then you poke it in the center of the cherry at the top. You take the stem off, and then you push through the cherry that way. And then what I did was I cut the cherries, washed them actually first before I did all that, and then I cut them in half, put them in a bowl, and added the breadcrumbs and the 3/4 cups of sugar. So I let that stand in the sugar and breadcrumbs while I prepared the dough part of this recipe. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to spoon the cherries onto the first layer of dough, rolled out dough. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to evenly put that on to the rolled out dough. This is a delicious recipe, and you should get fresh cherries if you can. So I'm just going to, and I've got 1 1/4 kilograms. It's about 2.5, approximately 2.5 pounds of cherries here. I use a lot of cherries in my in this recipe. More the better. And then, of course, I've rolled out the other dough recipe, the dough mound, and I'm going to be putting that on the top of this. So I've got it on ready on a parchment piece of paper. So it's going to have a lot of cherries on it. You can use half the amount, but I like to use a lot of cherries in this recipe. And then of course it's got the breadcrumbs. It's been the breadcrumbs are nice and moist. I used day-old bread, so I just cut up the pieces into small cubes, and I put it in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then baked it for about 10 minutes, and then I lowered the temperature, and then I stirred it with a wooden spoon in the oven, so I had it on a cookie sheet, and then I continued to bake it at 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's for the breadcrumbs, because I didn't have any. I usually go out and buy my breadcrumbs at the bakery, but I had some day-old bread at home, and thought I'd make my own homemade ground breadcrumbs. So I'm just going to evenly add this on the top, and this is a family favorite recipe. My grandmother would serve this to her guests during cherry season in Hungary. She'd make a strudel too, kind of like a cherry strudel. I have a great recipe from my grandmother. It's a little bit different. The pastry's a bit different than this one. This is more of like a pie, traditional pie recipe. So I'm just going to try to evenly distribute that. It takes a little bit of time to do that. And then I'm going to take, this is my other layer. I just put it on a cookie sheet because it just stays a lot more, it's a lot more firmer. Just has more stability there on a cookie sheet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this piece, and it's already got the parchment paper, so I've rolled it, and I'm going to put it on top of there, and I'm going to peel the parchment paper off. So that's what I'm going to do now. And this is a bit tricky, but then you lie it on top of that there like that, and then you peel the parchment paper off. It just makes things a lot easier. And then I'm just going to pinch this together a bit here on the sides. Make sure that the cherries are kind of in there, and push that down a bit. You can using your thumb around the edges like that. And then what I do is I cut some slits at the top of the, about 4 or 5 of them randomly on the top of the, pie, so that there's air coming out of it, so that it doesn't burst open and so I'm just going to go get some knives, and I'm just going to cut some slits, cut a few slits randomly, so that there's air coming through there, air going in there, because there's a lot of pressure when there's heat heat into it. So like that. And then what I'm going to do, I got the oven actually preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then I'm going to lower the temperature after about approximately 25 minutes, and then I'm going to lower the temperature to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, and bake it for an additional 20 minutes. So what I would do after about 25 minutes, I would check and see how the dough is and the pie is baking. And then what I'll do is I'll come back and I'll show you what this great recipe looks like coming fresh out of the oven. Welcome back again to Irinka's Kitchen. I had in the oven a recipe called Cseresznyés Lepény, and it's a cherry pie. And so I've had it in the oven for approximately about 45 minutes. And for the first 25 minutes I preheated the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then I lowered the temperature to 325 for an additional 20 minutes. And after about 25 minutes I checked to see how things were doing in the oven. And so what I'd like to do is show you what this great recipe looks like. It's smelling great in the kitchen. The aroma of the cherries and the lemon rind and all the ingredients of the recipe is just making the kitchen smell great. So here's the pie, and I've already cut up some pieces. And as you can see that the cherries are in between the two rolled out dough mounds. And then I've also sprinkled some icing sugar, powdered icing sugar for presentation. Generally I wouldn't put the icing sugar on the whole slab of the pie. As I would be cutting it up, I would be sprinkling it with the icing sugar. And it's still warm. What I've done is I've made sure to cool it down for about 20 minutes, and then I would start cutting up the pie if I was serving it to guests. I would probably prepare the cherries. I'd probably take out the pits of the cherries and cut them up and get those prepared and ready for the following day, because it is a lot of work to do that. And then what I'd like to do is show you what this recipe looks like when it's cut up and put onto a plate. So what I've done is I've sort of sprinkled icing sugar on the top. And then of course it goes great with a nice cup of tea. We have some really nice tea. This is a herbal tea, and you can serve that as a dessert for guests or for your own family. So I hope that you enjoy baking this great recipe, passed down from my grandmother to mother and to me. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me at Irene@irinkaskitchen.com or irinkaskitchen.com. Until next time, bon appetit, jó étvágyat!